back again, and yes, I've filmed a few of these back to back, hence why I'm still in the same top with the same hairstyle, same background and things like that as well. But when you get a spare 5 minutes and you can film a few things back to back, you kind of have to take that chance, particularly when you've got kids and half terms coming up. And I'm pretty sure you guys probably wouldn't want me to have like my kid popping in and out and things like that as well. So I tried to take that chance while I could, to try and crack on and get some done. So I will try and change up the outfits as I go along later on, maybe, or maybe I'll just do an outfit change for each one. So anyway, we're going to move on, and we're going to look at lesson planning actually. So this is still obviously going into the Educate and Inspire series. This is about like now just planning individual kind of lessons, okay? So what makes a good lesson plan? That's something we need to kind of decide on, isn't it, really? It is important that you plan your course, be it a day or several days. It needs planning. And in the loosest kind of sense, even if that's on a piece of paper, something is better than nothing at all. Ideally, in something a little bit more formalised would be a good idea. And something maybe typed up that you can tweak and change, and it should be what we call a working document. The idea of this is that you can come back to it again and tweak and change it as you go on. So with the first few times you start to write a lesson plan, you do need to expect to make sure that you're going to go back and you are going to start tweaking and changing and playing around with things as you go. It will never look exactly the same. Rarely can you write a perfect lesson plan the first time around, and you might have several different examples of learning that you've got coming through. It needs to be planned pretty much down to the hour, even down to the minutes, to be honest. It needs to be planned down in that much detail as well. So if you're writing your own, you're working on your own, you need to make sure that you plan this. Obviously, it's helpful if you have staff, or if you have anybody that needs to come and take over from you. It's good to have a plan of everything, how it was going to be, blow by blow, exactly what was going to take place and when it was going to take place. It also helps you to review. So it allows you to review and go back and look at the parts of it that maybe did work and the parts of it that didn't work. We need to be very reflective when we're teaching. No two groups are alike. So what worked with one set of students might not work with another set of students. That's just the nature of the beast, I'm afraid. You cannot kind of cookie cutter everybody into a same little mold and make them all react in exactly the same way, because they're different life experiences and life skills and knowledge that they come with prior will allow you to develop and tweak and change how your learning is going to become for that particular lesson. So you're never going to be able to follow an exact map for every single person that comes through your door. Okay, it's just not going to happen. Or if you do that, you're too rigid with what you're doing, and either they may not return or they may not get all the information they need, and they might just kind of switch off completely as well. You don't build up the rapport. The other thing it does is it keeps you on track. Giving yourself a time that you need to be started with an activity and finished with an activity gives you something to keep you on track. Make sure that the day progresses well, and that you don't deviate and get to the end and have to start rushing the last couple of bits, or then having to invite them to come back again. And I did put a little note in here saying I need to be kept on track. I'm the kind of person that needs to be kept on track. I like to talk, and it's not that I just like having a chin wag anyway. I'm not sat there deviating, getting off track. You know, it's always relevant to the subject and the task that we're up to as well. But I always feel like I've got a lot of knowledge I want to impart on a subject area. I'm very passionate, and I hope that kind of comes across as well, but it does with my students. So if any of my students, my past students, are on here, and this is going back to my years of teaching in a college and when I've been teaching on my own as well, I'm sure they would probably happily comment as well and say, yep, Dora likes to chat. I do like a talk. I feel like, you know, I could spend hours just talking about one small subject. I really could, and imparting a lot of knowledge. But however, you do need to keep yourself on track, and that's not the way to kind of do it as well. You know, you don't want to sit there talking forever more as well. So we do need to be very mindful of that. Keeping ourselves to the minute, how long we should take, and it just means that you've planned a little bit longer about how you're going to deliver something as well, and you plan for every eventuality that you've got with your learners. So we do need to watch that. So what will a good lesson plan have? Well, a good lesson plan will state the main objectives of the session, what the main thing is that you're after, trying to achieve, and the outcomes of that particular session as well, because it might be over a couple of days that you're doing this, or over a week or months, but basically you want to be able to state and tell them exactly what they will be able to do by the end. So at the beginning of the day, you know this, by the end of the day, you know this, and you will be able to do this confidently, for example. But that's not always the case. Some skills take longer. And some skills are shorter. So, but you need to be able to confidently say, this is what you're going to get by the end of today. Even if that is, you will be able to practice with guidance by the end of today, and the end of tomorrow, you'll be able to do this confidently on your own. So it might be something like that. Setup obviously required, what equipment you're going to need, what products you need for the session, and the sort of introduction as well to your session as well. That all needs to be part of that, and all needs to be in with that as well. It also helps staff members as well. So you have like almost like a nice itinerary kind of list, nice ingredients list of everything you're going to need to get out. It makes your life a bit easier. You don't have to stop and think about how you do a treatment. You can literally just have a nice list, get everything out from your box. I will do one of these at some point actually at my work, and you will see just the hordes of like kind of storage boxes and things like that, and cupboards and things like that, that I've got loads of stuff squirreled away in for all my teaching and training. And you do need that list, otherwise, you know, it becomes like that thinking process of everything you've got to do, and you might miss something. And there is nothing worse when you're about to demonstrate something and you look around you and realise you've missed something. I like to be prepped and prepared for everything. I like to get into my room an hour beforehand and plan everything out. I might have set up the day before, but I like to run over everything again and check it. And so I think that, you know, having a list will help, and certainly will help staff members as well, or someone that might have to come and take over from you one day. So obviously introduce your session, and then you've got your theory related to your subject, and you want to put that down on how you're going to deliver that as well. So is that going to be PowerPoints? Is it going to be using a manual? Is it going to be using a whiteboard? How is the theory being delivered? You may have done some pre-reading in advance. Does that mean you're going to do a check on learning first, and then do a little bit more kind of theory delivered based on the practical elements you're going to do? Is it going to be a 2 or 3 day course? So you're going to do a recap at the beginning, do a little bit more practical, then do another recap. You know, it needs to be like, how are you going to deliver this subject area? And then the demonstration of the actual subject. Let's face it, a lot of what we do is practical based. So you need to be able to demonstrate if a small part, if not the whole part. It really does depend on what it is you're teaching. You know, for example, if we were going to take something really big like a facial, there's no way I would make students sit there for an hour watching me do a whole facial from start to finish. You know, I break it down into sections. The very most they're going to get out the first part is how to kind of cleanse, how to do a skin analysis. That's it. That's the first section. I want to show them that, then I want them to do that, and then we can build upon that afterwards. And that's why that takes, you know, more than a day in my eyes. It takes more than a day for me to get through all of those different little parts, because I like to build it as I go, and allow them to kind of practice everything they've learned as they build it as they go as well, to kind of be able to do that on their own as we keep adding to that. You also then need to give them somewhere where they can practice as well the subject that you're teaching. So they need to know that they can like do this on their own with their guidance, and you might even have another person after that as well. Quite often I'll bring in a couple of models, and I'll have one for me to demo, I'll have one for my students to practice on, and then I'll have another one for their check on learning. And the check on learning is quite important. This is the bit when you let them freestyle, you take a back seat for a moment, you let them go back through their notes, and you let them perform the treatment again in front of you with you watching, obviously interjecting wherever you need to, but you ultimately to check on the learning that's taken place, how they absorbed all of that, how are their notes written down. That's the most important thing for me. I always make my students at the end go back over their notes, and make sure that they can read their notes that they've written, that they understand what they mean by each word that they've written. So when they go away to practice at home, they know exactly what that meant. 9 times out of 10, you know, they'll go home and go, I can't even remember why I wrote that. Like, what was that little bit there? And so I like to go back over those types of things as well with my learners. You also need to do a check on learning. So you need to check from a theoretical point of view for like quizzes, could be a Q&A session. It could be actually a formal kind of examination kind of test as well that you might do. It could be just firing some questions at them as well, letting them fire questions maybe back at you, maybe kind of reverse roles a little bit. So somehow you've got to check the theory as well as the practical. They might really grasp the practical. Let's face it, sometimes we are more practical people, but sometimes it's the theory that can take a little bit of time as well. So you need to make sure that you've got that underpinning knowledge in there as well. And then obviously you need to review the outcomes as well. You need to take your learners back to those initial outcomes and objectives that you had and say to them, like, you know, have we achieved this? Let's go use this as a tick list together. Did we do this? Did we do that? Did we do the check on learning? Have we done this? Did we achieve this part of it? You know, you need to kind of look at that and then review that lesson. And you can do that with them, and you can do that when they're not there as well afterwards, have a personal reflection. But I think reviewing it with them, particularly if you're seeing them on a regular basis or you're seeing them over a period of a few days, you can go back and look at any of the missing outcomes and look at continuing that on in your next session. So maybe you've got a set of students and it just took that a little bit longer with the practical this time round, because it happens with the best planning in the world. Sometimes some people need a little bit more practice, and so you've decided not to move forward, because there's no point blasting forward if they haven't got the foundations of an area in place, and you might decide to spend the rest of the day practicing on that. We need to be a bit flexible with that, so therefore you then might have to have them back for another session to go back over the other bits that you need. So we do need to bear that in mind. We need to be quite flexible with what we're doing, as much as possible, and build in some slack time really within a session, not going right down to the minute and then saying, I'm really sorry, I've like got to shut shop, I've got to go, because you might actually spill over. I always allow for a little bit of spillover time, because, you know, not everybody's going to be perfect, not everybody's going to get everything straight away. There's always skills that people will struggle with more than others, or they just might not understand the theory, in which case you need to just sit them down at the end and just go back over some theory areas, maybe give them a chance to go away and do a little bit more work after you've explained it, and then come back to you with the quiz before you certificate. So you really need to kind of think about these things really. And obviously each one of these activities is outcomes need to be timed, you know, so it might be 10 minutes to maybe talk about the outcomes, maybe it's 20 minutes on a practical demonstration, and you might find you've got demonstrate, practice, you know, 10 or 20 minutes, lunch break, 10, you know, then another 10 or 20 minutes practice, you know, it's that type of thing that might happen. But it literally does need to be down to the minute, a blow by blow account of what it is you're going to do, and to allow that space, and to allow that kind of practical to take place and for people to absorb it. There's nothing worse than trying to cram everything in because your head is just full. I mean, how many of us, hands up, have been on courses where you've just done the theory in the morning, you feel like your head's going to explode, and you're desperate to get onto the practical, because we all know we're better at the practical, and for me it cements everything when everything goes in on a practical aspect for me, and so therefore I'm desperate to get on the practical side of things. You know, I do love my theory, particularly love A&P actually. That's one of my favourite areas. But, you know, you need that little bit of time to absorb stuff as well. Give people time to start processing it before you keep layering more and more and more on as well. So, you know, we do need to break it down into more bite-sized chunks. Just because you can run through it, and I do think that's the difference, run through it, say, in a day or half a day, doesn't mean to say they're going to be competent or absorb it by that point as well. So you need to really kind of go back to that, use your experiences as well, and think, okay, just because I can deliver it in this time, does it mean they're going to be competent in this time period as well? So you need to think about that. You might have several points obviously where you're going to demonstrate and then practice under guidance and breaking your subject down. You need to include your breaks as well, lunch breaks in there. Give them a coffee break mid-morning, mid-afternoon. Give them time just to decompress for a moment, take a breath of fresh air, have something to drink, go to the bathroom, that kind of stuff, then come back to something again and just quickly recap what you did do, or do a bit of Q&A. Give them space and time to ask questions. There is nothing worse than someone saying, have you got a question? No, 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 right, we're done. It doesn't happen that quickly. On average, they say it takes somewhere between kind of like 6 to 10 seconds while you think about, have you got a question? So if they haven't already been making notes and asking questions as they've gone along, you need to give them that space. So you're better off saying, right, if you've got any questions, I'm just going to give you 5 minutes to think about it, have a discussion with yourselves. There's a group of people, go back through your notes, double check what you've got. Then I'm going to come back in 5 minutes, you know, I'll finish tidying up or something like that, or go and grab a coffee. And then let's come back to your questions that you might have before you leave. Whereas if you just ask them there and then, most people won't be able to answer straight away. It takes them a little while to process everything and kind of in their head go back through all the different outcomes you went through and then think, have I got a question? So unless they've been able to make notes as they've gone along about a question they might have, it might take them a moment or two to think about it. So you need to give them that time and space as well with that. And where possible, try and give your learners a rough itinerary in advance. Give them a plan of the day, particularly when you've got to work around people that might have health conditions and things like that as well, which means that, you know, particularly if they're diabetic, they've got to eat at certain points. You want to kind of be flexible with that, and let them know, like, this is how our day is going to look, this is where we're going to do some theory, this is where we're going to start some practical elements. You know, you can come dressed down for this, but we're going to need to change into our tunics for this part of it, or whatever it is that you're going to be doing. And yeah, give them a little bit of an itinerary. Some people don't like coming into the unknown. They want to know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, roughly maybe even what subject areas you're going to be covering, and as much information as you can give in advance to your learners. Maybe send that through with the confirmation of booking or something like that once they've paid, so they know how their day is going to progress, where their rough time is for starting, where their finish time is. They can plan their travel and things like that, but always say to them, allow for a little bit of overspill, because you're going to want to spend some time with them immediately afterwards if they haven't got something, or you're going to be setting homework and things as well, maybe. So these are kind of points that we need to consider. The other thing as well is, I always like to say to my students is, whilst there are certain courses that I will certificate relatively quickly for, there are some things I won't, and if I don't feel happy at the time, I say to them that I hold the right to withhold their certificate until I've seen further evidence. So everyone's never going to maybe necessarily not pass with me, but they're going to pass eventually, but they might need more time, more tuition, more case studies than, say, the person next to them, because it's their own individual learning journey. And I think that's really important to make that quite clear. Just because they all arrive and all do something at the same time, everybody's journey is different. Sometimes some people just need a little bit more embedding, or they maybe need to even pop back to another session. And that's fine as well. I let my students come back to another session, so you might find that might work better for you, but you need to kind of plan for that eventuality as well, is what happens if they don't kind of prove competent on the day. Then you need to have a backup plan for that, and a support system in place as well. How are you going to support them? So differentiation is like, what is this word? This is about how we make things different and adaptable for our different learners' needs, essentially. So I want you to think about, when you're planning your lessons, how can you adapt this to your different learners' needs? Because everybody learns differently. We all have different learning styles, different learning methods naturally anyway. And some people have learning difficulties as well that puts like a barrier to their typical learning as well. And there are some people, I mean, you know, to go for a fairly good example, I've had several, like hundreds of dyslexic students over my years of teaching, and every single one of those students that has suffered with dyslexia has had various different ways that they need to have things done. So they'll need different colour paper, for example, they'll need a certain font, but that's not everybody. I've had a learner that needed white paper and not colour paper in the past. Sometimes, you know, if something has a lot of text, you know, can you give audio versions of your manuals? You know, there's things like this. You know, how many companies do you know do an audio version of the manual for the learners, so that they've got something where they can listen to that, like a podcast type thing, rather than just having this like reams of paper in front of them, because it all just jumps about all over the place. And particularly if the text isn't written in something that's friendly for, say, someone that does suffer with dyslexia, and that's putting like a barrier in the way of their learning. They've already got enough to deal with as it is about getting and processing information in, and quite often they need to concentrate on more the practical aspects, because that's where their strengths lie. But obviously they know that their theory is important. But obviously, you know, if you're just handing out a massive big thick wad of manual, how are you going to overcome that? You need to think about that. Are you flexible? Are you empathetic to like their different learning styles of others? You know, are you going to be able to move things around for them? Tweak how they learn things a little bit more? Are you going to be able to add in a little bit more practical elements, break things down a little bit more for a learner? How can you achieve some of this? You need to really think about all these different learning styles that you have with people. I have happily, you know, obviously we make more money, don't we, when we have 5 or 6 or whatever it is on a course, but I have happily done a one-to-one, and I do that for the same price as a group of students as well. So I'm not charging them any more than what they would have had if I had 4, 5 or 6 or whatever, or 2. But sometimes I book someone on their own, just in my diary, because I know they're going to need me. They're going to need my attention more. We're going to tweak the learning that might not suit maybe some of the others as well. And so I will do it in that way for them. And I am quite happy to do that because I think that's my job as an educator, is to be adaptable, because ultimately my goal is to get them through the course, make them successful at that treatment that they're learning, and make them successful in their business. And I don't want to put any learning barriers in the way. So I really want to be able to help them the best way I can. If that means one-to-one work, then I will do one-to-one work. Obviously, it's up to you whether you want to charge extra for something like that. But personally, for me, I don't. I just see that as my job, and I'm quite happy to do that for my learners. Sometimes it just works better like that for them. Obviously, same as before, any questions, comments, feel free to PM me directly. That's absolutely fine. Pop some bits on the bottom. That's not an issue. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you all again soon. I'm going to be covering some more things about manual writing, things like that soon. So yeah, just let me know. Have a great day.